Welcome in, Hawks fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for another Believe in Hawks episode. A lot to talk about today on Believe in Hawks. I'm going to give a quick little thought on the quietness of the Atlanta Hawks president of basketball operations search. Just, what that could mean, where we are right now. Nothing significant, but just my thoughts. And then also, guys, that's that time of the year. Players posting in the gym, Dyson Zacc in the gym, working on their games, trying to get better, trying to take that next step for next season. Two key cogs to the Hawks if they do decide to run it back. Then we'll also go into some conversations, some playoff talk, playoff risers, playoff fallers, how a player can play the regular season, get to the postseason, get to a round, and then the entire image of that player changes if they struggle. And then also the East seeming wide open next year, how that potentially impacts the Hawks. And I'll break down each team and tell you why the East is technically wide open and how that could change a team's mindset if they're trying to either decide, should we tear it down, take a step, et cetera, et cetera. So we talk about all that today on Believe in Hawks. I appreciate you guys tuning in for another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment down below. Follow me on X at Brycey_2K for all my Hawks takes and knowledge, things of that nature. So appreciate you guys. And let's go ahead and dive right in. So Hawks, really no news, no real news has came out recently about the Hawks search for a president of basketball operations. And a lot of people are kind of like, okay, well, what's going to happen? We've seen some reports talk about that they may just let Ansi Salah run the show, which some people are like, well, if you're going to do that, why did you not just keep Landry Fields? Which Landry Fields was fired a couple of days after the season ended for the Hawks. So here's what I'll say to that. Sometimes when teams make these moves, they have a person in mind or a person they've already started talking to or tampered with to know, oh, they'll join. We can go ahead and make this move, make the change, and get this person in. This entire search and entire process has came off to me as the Hawks really never had like just that one person that they knew they were going to get. This truly was a wide-ranging search. We are going to search across the league, interview multiple people from agents. You heard big names like Masai Ujiri, Danny Ferry, Bob Myers, former guys who were GMs or heads of basketball operations, Monty McNair, Calvin Booth, agents, Giannis's agent, Trey's agent. We've heard it all. But for the most part, from what I heard from a lot of people, a lot of Hawks fans, is that outside of the big names, nobody really was moving anybody. And maybe this process for the Hawks, that's how they feel. The big names aren't wanting to do it just maybe because they're not interested. Like Bob, he likes his job. He wants to stay on the West Coast. Masai, people have tried to pry him away from Toronto when he hasn't joined. Danny Ferry, just controversy if you bring him in. There's no just seamless fit for the Hawks. It's not like when they hired Quinn Snyder and they said, hey, Quinn, would you come? And then he was like, yeah. And it's like, okay, we'll get rid of Nate. It wasn't like that. So I think for the most part, we've heard that they have thought Ansi has done a really good job. Some people are asking, what has he done? Listen, he's been here since before this past season. So we don't know what his voice was in those rooms, in those conversations, in those meetings. We don't know what his role and influence was. And that could ultimately be one of the main reasons why they feel good and confident about him right now. He has been highly touted around the league. He was viewed as Bob Myers' right-hand man in Golden State. So, clearly he has, and he was with the Spurs organization before that. So he has gone through some really good organizations. He's seen some high-level front office direction. And so maybe they feel like he's been able to show that a little bit here in Atlanta, and they like it. And they're just going about their offseason still with evaluating guys for the NBA draft coming up and going through everything that, a normal GM would do around this time. And I've said that if Giannis requests a trade, I am curious to know if that makes the Hawks become more aggressive, makes them want to make a move, makes them want to go and say, okay, we maybe need to go get a guy just so we can start the process. If that is indeed a sweepstakes they're going to get themselves into. We've seen the Hawks connected to Giannis in multiple stories throughout the offseason so far. But at the same time, if Giannis doesn't request a trade or this takes forever, they may just feel like there's no rush. What is the rush? There's no moves that have to be made right now. Like, what are we rushing a guy in there for? Maybe outside of the draft. I know that Jake Fisher was kind of like, well, you would think they would hire someone for the draft just to have someone in place by the draft. So there's still a few weeks before that. So there's still a chance to do that. We just don't know if that's actually going to happen. Right. And so I think for the most part, the Hawks are just going to take this with a very chill pill. Just go through the process, see what happens. And if Auntie Salah is the guy running it, I guess we're going to find out what Auntie Salah can do. We know he's a great cap strategist. And don't forget, this isn't just Auntie Salah. Even Kyle Korver is also an assistant GM. And I know a lot of people view him as a player development guy, but I'm sure he's involved in those conversations. Remember, when they were scouting Richeche last year, he went out to those trips with him. So he's involved in those decisions. He's working with a team. Gwen Snyder, they say, has some control and some voice in the room as well. So this isn't a situation where it's just Auntie Salah and no one else talking. There's still a collaborative decision-making going on in Atlanta. And it's just Auntie might just have more power now than obviously when Landry was here, even though I had said previously on the podcast, a lot of people said that Landry maybe didn't have as much power as player of people in his position did have. So we'll have to kind of see how that kind of comes all together for the Hawks and see if there is any new updates or movement soon on that president search. So that's just my take there. Also, like I mentioned, it's that time of the year guys are getting in the gym. Dyson Zacc Richeche in the gym, posting videos. Dyson working with Phil Handy, a guy who has been credited for multiple guys' developments in LA. I think they said he worked with Kawhi. He worked with a lot of guys and helped improve their games. And he's considered one of the best player development coaches in the game today. And Dyson, clearly, he's been very vocal about what he wants to get better at. Very vocal about he thinks he could be the most improved player again next year. And I think him working with a guy like Phil Handy shows you how committed he is to the game. Like, he wants, and I always go back to what he said at the beginning of the year. He said, I want to take pressure off Trae Young on the offensive end. And the thing is, I think Dyson's offense came along more than people expected this past season, but we still know there's a lot of work to be done. And in some of the videos, you're seeing him working on the pull-up jumper. That could be an excellent part, especially for a guy who I think Dyson's a good attacker, a good driver of the basketball. Sometimes, if they won't let you get all the way to the rim for the floater, pulling up for the midi. And listen, Quinn's not a big fan of it. I noticed as the season went on, he kind of started letting some people take it a little bit more. Because at the end of the day, if the team's going to cut you off before the basket, if you're able to stop on a dime and pull up, that could still be a good shot. You're using the defender's momentum against him in that situation. And he's able to do that when he does his drive to the hole spin floater. So they're hoping that he can do this again with the jump shot. And just working overall on just how he can be more effective, add some more moves to his repertoire. And I'm really excited to see what Dyson really gets out of these workouts, working on it right now, just grinding, going through it, and just trying, like I said, take another step in his progression, in his development next year for this team. And then obviously Zacc, we know the biggest thing for him is just putting on weight, getting stronger, growing, another year of growth. He's already been working, also working on his game, maybe working on how to working on, attacking off contact, attacking the rim, obviously, maybe developing a guy who's like 6'10". If I'm Zacc, if you can develop even just a mink of a post game, that would be huge. Because there will be nights where you play against smaller defenders. And if you can get a bit of a post game, that might really be official for his offense. And just working on his shooting, working on his touch, and just using those things. And obviously trying to tighten his handle. Obviously his handle was a little loose at times last year. So those are also things that I think Richeche will be working on throughout the offseason. Like I said, those are two key pieces to this team if they run it back. And if they can make jumps in year 2 as starters for the Atlanta Hawks, that will be huge for this team and potentially in a wide open Eastern Conference where they may be able to make a run in that particular situation because those guys were able to take that next step. I mean, listen, like I said, Richeche, we know, like I said, just age, youth, experience. That's the biggest thing for him. And then just like understanding his holes in his game and trying to get better. Dyson already doing so much defensively, already doing so much, or what he's asked on offense and just adding to that as well. So, both of those guys putting in work. Even Jalen Johnson getting back in the gym. I think it's been like 4 months since his surgery. I think he's back. He's been back in the gym with his trainer, Chris Johnson. So he's already putting in work. And the biggest thing for Jalen is not just, improving his game, just, he has to getting more comfortable. Remember, you come off a shoulder injury. How does he feel when he dunks? How does he feel when he gets a little contact? Just things like that, getting confidence back in that shoulder. And like I said, Jalen, he loves basketball. That man constantly is in the gym as well. So the one thing about the guys that you have in this core is they love work. They're going to work. They're going to grind. They're not. I mean, obviously, I don't know what they're doing at the personal time, so I'm not going to say they're not going to party. But for the most part, when we see them, they be working. And so I'm excited to really see how all those guys come along. And, we go into next season, and as the offseason goes on, how this team starts to shape up. Now, let's talk about the status of the Eastern Conference, right? I know that with the Eastern Conference seemingly wide open based off what's happened during these playoffs, some people are wondering how this impacts the Hawks, but also how it impacts the entire Eastern Conference. There was a report from Mark Stein in terms of the Bucks' future and Giannis about they're trying to convince him that they just need a gap year. When they talk to him, just give us a year to get assets, and then the next year we'll be back to competing for championships, right? But a lot of teams are going to be looking at this next season and thinking, if you've been that team that that's been on the borderline, who's kind of been sitting there, kind of, you might be able to break through if you make the right move, but you're also kind of middling. You may have, before this past season, before the injury to Jason Tatum, the Cleveland crash out, everything. Maybe we need to blow it up. Maybe we need to, maybe get some resources. But with the injuries, it feels like the East is wide open. It feels like if you're a team, you may look at this opportunity and say, why can't we maybe be aggressive this offseason, make some moves, and then be able to take advantage of it? I think people are viewing the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals as there's no team that's just like, this is a daunting team to face. It's more of matchups, luck. Can we get the right type of team put together, whatever your team's situation is, and then be able to compete against those guys? Because like I said, when it comes to the Hawks, I've heard a lot of people, Zach Lowe said it, some other people have said it, where they kind of feel like because of the East being as wide open as it is, because of where the East is, some of them are kind of like, why don't the Hawks just run it back? I've heard some people say Hawks should run it back. And, because they feel like, listen, you got players that people like Zach, people like Dyson, people like Jalen. So, I think Zach Lowe said he likes the vets too. He likes, George Niang and Terrence Mann, and we'll see what happens with Karis LeVert. But he's kind of feeling like with the East the way it is, he was talking like the Hawks could honestly, because of what it is, could be a top 6 seed next year if they ran it back. And I know that's a debate in a lot of Hawk circles. Like, would that be a good idea? Are the Hawks, do the Hawks need to be aggressive for a star? Obviously, we're waiting on Giannis's decision, what he's going to do. I alluded to a bit earlier that if Giannis does request a trade, that could impact the Hawks' president search situation, could make them a little bit more aggressive potentially. We'll have to see if that actually does. If he stays, then I think they just continue to run the course. And if there is someone that they really want, they'll get him. If not, Ansi Salah will run the show. But, I think, think about, let's think about the Eastern Conference. So, okay, Cleveland. Biggest issue with them is no one thinks they're for real. Now, they did have some injuries going into that second round series against Indiana, some after game one. They may feel like those injuries hindered them from being able to, beat Indiana, regardless of whatever everybody thinks. This is just from Cleveland's perspective. And so from that perspective, they feel like run it back another year. Guys can stay healthy. You can still maybe make 1 or 2 changes if you need to your roster, and then see what that looks like next year. I would feel like after next year, you'd probably be in a bit of a situation where if you don't break through, if you don't at least make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, that could lead to a breakup. Donovan Mitchell requesting a trade, Darius Garland requesting a trade. You're going to have to make some moves. You have some key players in Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. We'll have to see how Cleveland's mindset is with everything. but like no one views them as like, oh, they're going to break through. Even though they could, no one sees it. They think they're playoff frauds. Obviously, we know Boston's situation. Jason Tatum goes down. With that happening, Jaylen Brown, Derek White seemingly will be the top two guys next year, with the rumors of Drew Holiday potentially being traded, Kristaps Porzingis being traded. Maybe they have to move some other people as well. What does Boston look like? It feels like Boston could still be competitive next year. They just won't be championship competitive. And I think we don't know what that looks like until obviously the offseason goes through and goes by. But Boston pretty much in a lot of people's eyes has now moved out of the title picture, at least for 1 year, until Tatum gets back. And then we'll see what Boston looks like the year he's able to get back to being Jason Tatum. And even that, coming back from an Achilles is not an easy injury to come back from and being yourself. So we never know if Boston's window has officially closed forever or if Tatum can get back to the guy he was. Then you look at Indiana. Indiana right now has a 2-1 lead on New York as of this recording. And, a lot of people think they're going to the NBA Finals. They have a unique style of play that I've always been very appreciative of. I've always said that I feel like the way Quinn wants him to play is basically how Indiana plays basketball. He would want that to be how the Hawks play basketball. Quick decision, shooting, driving. Like it's very reminiscent of what Quinn probably in his head wants the team to look like offensively. And I think it's because the Pacers offense puts so much pressure on your defense. It's like it makes you unable to truly get set because they move with such precision, such quickness, and they don't have high turnovers. Usually high octane offenses like that, there's high turnovers. That just comes along when you're in ball motion, ball movement, just constantly going fast offense. That's just because you're not able to be as sharp as you are in a half-court set where it's more slowed down, more methodical. So they made it to these conference finals second year in a row. Might make it to the finals. They are still in a position next year. They'll probably be good. If Indiana may be viewed as the team to beat next year in the Eastern Conference. And the thing about it, even though they've had a great playoff run, they've had some luck. They've had some key injuries that they from to other teams they've played. They've had some luck. They've had a lot of comebacks as well. So when you look at something like that, you're almost like, a couple of things didn't go their way. They're beatable. And so I don't think it's one of those things where you look at them as they could be the team to beat next year in the Eastern Conference, but they're a very beatable team to beat. And so you feel like, oh, okay, if we, make the right moves, why can't we compete with those guys? New York Knicks, they'll probably run it back with Brunson and Cat. We know what they can do. Brunson's one of those clutch players in the game. Cat, when he's on, can be on like he did in the fourth quarter in that comeback for the Knicks. They have Miles, Mikal Bridges, who I don't know why I said Mikal Bridges, who obviously can score when he gets it going. OG Anunoby's a really good player, championship level player, and Josh Hart. You got Mitchell Robinson, guys like that. Deuce McBride. They'll be in the picture again. As you can see, they're beatable. They're very beatable. Detroit pushed them. And right now, we'll see how this series ends up with the Pacers, but. Again, they're not a team that's just like, there's no way we can beat the Knicks. Especially because I think a lot of people do question Tom Thibodeau, his coaching, if he can, because some people feel like the first two games were on Tom Thibodeau, but he did make good adjustments in game 3. So we'll have to see the verdict on that. And that means there could be a lot of pressure on the Knicks to be even more successful next year than they were this season, depending again how the season ends for them. And so we'll have to see, but the Knicks again, a beatable team in people's eyes. The Hawks were 2-1 when Jaylen played in the New York Knicks game, so they won the first 2 against them when Jaylen played. Detroit, as I mentioned, they're kind of a team that is rising. They'll have to make some moves. I think Detroit's going through that same process. Do we stay, let some guys get better, let some guys develop? Do we try to make a swing for someone? They're kind of in that position as well. You were a top 16. You're building a really strong defense. You have Cade, who's a star in this league. Some very nice young pieces. Maybe you can get Beasley back this offseason in free agency, one of the best 3-point shooters in the game, and see what that looks like. But again, they're a team that they're not world beaters. And that kind of goes for the majority of the East. There's no world beater of a team in the Eastern Conference. If you look at Oklahoma City, like for the most part, everybody knew talent-wise are the best team. Like, they should beat everybody. It was just the youth. People weren't sure about the youth. Are they too young? They grew up before our eyes in the Denver series. Guys, had gone through struggle. Because playoffs, there's going to be a lot of struggle. There's going to be a lot of things. And I'll go a little bit into a topic about, like, playoff risers and fallers. But, it's a little bit different in the Western Conference. It feels like if you ain't at that level, you might as well just try to reset, because it's not like you got, East, there's beatable teams. If we get the right luck, maybe a key injury to the other team and, right matchups, we can beat those guys, And so I think for the Hawks, it's right there for them if they wanted to go either direction. I think I've talked about before the plus and minuses of both directions. If you run it back, you have a chance for a more sustainable, consistent winning team. But at the same time, you do have to, but then you're also not sure if the core will be good enough to win a championship. You don't know until they're put in a position, you see it at full display. Because as a reminder, the starting lineup, Trey, Zacc, Dyson, Jalen, and Okongwu has only played, I think, a total of 16 minutes in terms of starter minutes together. So it's not like you've seen them together that much. So that's something that they'll look at. But obviously, like I said, the downfall is like you don't know if they'll actually break through. But the positive is if they do break through, you have a much more sustainable winner, much more sustainable, consistent playoff team. If you go with Giannis, you now have a more top-heavy roster, right? Let's say you keep Dyson, right? So you have a very top-heavy roster. You have 3 really good players. The downside is, are you going to be able to get enough depth? Because you see in this playoffs, depth is kind of important. You need to have some guys who can step up outside of the stars, because sometimes that can be the difference in a game where the stars go crazy, but they just didn't get anything else from anybody. And so that's what leads to you losing, and then you're cooked. So they have directions they can go in. But again, I don't know what the Hawks' plan is. I don't know what Salah's plan is. I don't know how he's viewing next season. I don't know if the Tatum injury and what happened in the Eastern Conference playoffs changed anything for the Hawks. I have no clue if any of that has changed anything for those guys. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how the Hawks approach it this offseason as we do get closer to, the draft, free agency, and then we get into camp. So we'll have to see how that looks if the Hawks do take that route to go and say, boom, let's go ahead and be aggressive. Or, hey, we think we continue to develop our guys, get better. East is a little wide open. We might be able to make a run. You never know. But then I'll talk about this, and then a quick thing on the playoffs in terms of what's going on. There's been some discussion online about, the playoffs in the regular season are like 2 different things, right? And what I mean by that is there are players in the regular season who play really, really well. And this is really your role players. This is really your non-stars on your playoff teams. And then they get to the postseason and they struggle. They have a series where it's not good. And now the narrative kind of switches on them. For example, Ty Jerome. He finished, I believe, 3rd and 6th man of the year. Man has a terrible playoff series against the Pacers. And, literally, Cleveland fans were like, can he go? And people were like, I don't think Ty Jerome. And obviously that was because Garland was out, and so he had to step up, and he couldn't. And so people are now like, oh, my God, I don't know if he's even good. I don't know if he's a playoff player. We need to find someone else. Like the regular season and the postseason are so different in that regard, because regular season is a different game. It's called differently. Any team that wants to play a certain way, you can basically play any style you want in the regular season. Where postseason, you always hear it's a grinded out style. Like it becomes that because they don't call as many things. It's a much more physical game, so you have to completely change how you play, and you have to be able to play more in the half court. Where in the regular season, you can kind of just play any type of style you prefer, whatever you think works best for your team, because of how the game's called. And so certain players can rise and be like, oh man, he's been so good this year. And then the postseason come and the game changes and they struggle in that environment. And now you're like, I don't know if this guy is it. I don't know if we need to move this guy. Like I said, Ty Jerome was one guy. Naz Reid. He's been a guy who I've seen some Hawks fans kind of be like, should we go for Naz Reid? This Oklahoma City series for him has been really bad. It has. It has not been a good series for Naz Reid against Oklahoma City. And you have people asking, is Naz Reid really a winning 16-game playoff player, or is he a specialist? Again, you see what I'm saying? Naz Reid is one of the most popular players in the game. He is a guy who, you think about like, man, he's such a great backup center who could start for so many teams. But yet there's questions about, is he a guy that you can rely on in the postseason because of the performance? Like I said, a series can completely change the narrative on a player. Completely change the narrative on a player. And it makes you completely look at everything a bit differently. And so, it's so interesting to kind of just see the reaction of certain players. Like, it's funny because Andrew Nembhard is the opposite of that. He plays better in the postseason. So it's like, oh, he steps up, which when you see that, you're like, oh, he's a playoff riser. Like the big lights, make him play better. Because you think of the Pacers, you're thinking about Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard and TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin. And you're like, these are just regular. You think in your head, these are just regular role players. Obviously Nembhard's probably the best out of the role of all of them, and he's a good player for sure. But like none of them's like, oh my God, that's a star. But yet they have played such vital roles in Indiana's success during the postseason. All of their role players have actually either been where they were in the regular season or gone up, which is why they've been as good as they've been. And usually in the postseason, it's always very iffy with your role players because sometimes they don't play as well and sometimes they do. Sometimes role players diminish and sometimes role players step up, or it's like maybe game 1 they don't, but game 2 they're huge. Game 3 they're huge. Game 4 they're okay. Game 5 they're great. Game 6 they're not. Game 7 they come back. That really could be the journey of a role player in a 7-game series. And if you can get your role players to be the most consistent, that can help you lead to the most success. Like if you think about it, that is so key to go along with your top guys because it just helps the support. Because the playoffs, like I said, regular season, you may be averaging 120, 125 points. Postseason, you may be averaging like 105, 108. Different game. So it's a lower scoring game. So it's not even just scoring. It's how can these players impact the game defensively, rebounding, assist? Can they impact the game in different ways outside of scoring if it's not that type of game? Because you sometimes have them games where maybe an 89, 86 game. You get those still. And so then at that point, it's about, can you make enough of the other plays to help enough and hope you get enough scoring to get by? So I just think that's been an interesting thing that I've seen some people talking about, playoff risers and playoff people, because some guys have to get into the postseason, experience it, fail, then get that experience, change a little bit maybe of the mental, and then take a step forward. It's just part of it. Obviously, in the Hawks situation, if they get to the postseason next year, Jalen, Ricochet, and Dyson will be starters in the postseason for the first time. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that. Now, play-in was a little bit of that energy when we saw Zacc didn't play well and Dyson didn't play well, and Jalen wasn't healthy. But if they all get there, how do they respond? How do they rise? Do they fall? That's going to be a big part for them. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see, again, just the narratives of the playoffs and how things go on certain players as you go through a postseason. And lastly, before we go, just mention the playoffs real quick. Obviously, like I said, Pacers are up 2-1. I think Pacers win that game series in 5. I think the Knicks, got their one big, I feel like you always get that one big win, and then you're like, all right, well, Indiana's going to be like, all right, well, we don't need to come out and do that again. Now, they could win and go 2-2. Very much this series either is ending in 5 or it's going 7 to me. If the Knicks won game 2, they're going to 7. If the Knicks lose, it's 5 to me. Like I said, I mentioned how Indiana plays, and I just think, we'll see how Indiana adjusts to the Knicks adjustments and see how Rick Carlisle, who I think during this playoff run is reminding a lot of people why he was considered one of, if not the best coach in the game after Dallas won that championship, with what he's doing with Indiana. And then the Western Conference side with Oklahoma City now at 3-1, looks like the ant is cooked. It'll be interesting with Minnesota because it feels like a team like where are you getting better next year? Like I've seen a lot of people talk about Rob Dillingham, like he's going to have to maybe become a guy because he's a guy who, when he came out of Kentucky, can score the ball. And it feels like with Mike Conley not really being, and he's never been a great offensive player, but not as maybe a reliable, consistent offensive guy as he was before. Some people are maybe looking at, do you look at Rob Dillingham? Do you try to find an upgraded guard to try to help Ant with some scoring in these series and different things? So I think they're about to lose in Game 5 to Oklahoma City. I think Oklahoma City will be in the finals, and I think they will win it all. So that's just what I'm thinking right now in the playoffs. But I think that's about it for me, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in for another Believe in Hawks episode. If you guys enjoyed the episode, definitely hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment down below. Follow me on X at Bryce_2K. We'll see. Obviously, I'm working to get some guests onto the show. Obviously, we're going to continue with the elite content that we've been putting out all summer long, and or ever since the season ended. And yeah, we're just gonna have a good time, and draft's gonna be approaching here, so I'll probably have more draft coverage here for you soon. And yeah, we'll keep grinding, man. But it's your boy Bryce Lewis. We'll see you next time.